Happy Wednesday of game week, Penn State fans. It's the Blue White Illustrated BWI Live Show on August 28th. I'm Greg Pickel. That's Thomas Frank Carr, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for all your latest Penn State news. And, of course, here wherever you get your audio and on our YouTube channel. Today's show, getting into West Virginia. We'll have a practice availability tonight. We're going to talk about what we expect to see there. And then the bulk of our show today will be spent on either your questions, a preview of the Mountaineers, or maybe both. So hit like and subscribe. Join us in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you guys. T. Frank, the long wait for game day is almost over. We have made it to 10 a.m. on Wednesday, August 28th. Kickoff set for August 31st, of course, at noon in Morgantown. So we're closing in on the 72-hour mark. How are we feeling about things? Game week underway, off and running. And I think even though the Penn State-West Virginia point spread's dropping a little bit, some places it's down to 8. Penn State, of course, favored by that number. There's no indication to me that Penn State's confidence going into this game should in any way be changed from where it was before preseason camp kicked off.
Yeah, neither is mine. And this is my point. I never feel more prepared or confident, and yet at the same time less confident than I do week one of the college football season, because I have a month to look at this team and preview what they are and their returning pieces, their strengths, their weaknesses, et cetera, but it's week one, and you never know what they're going to be. You never know what they're going to do. So I always feel a certain level of panic by Wednesday or Thursday of have I done enough prep to know what's upcoming for the upcoming opponent, but I never do for week one. So I feel really good. I feel ready to go and have this conversation today. Penn State, and to that point, I think it's just that last-minute surge of confidence of you got a home game, you got a good quarterback returning, and some of the things we'll get into in the preview of West Virginia that's giving people that confidence, that groundswell that, hey, we saw an upset in week 0. Maybe we'll see another one in week 1.
I do think we'll see one in week 1. I do not think it will be in Morgantown, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. For starters, we are going to get into some thoughts on tonight's practice media viewing window. James Franklin and a few players are set to talk after that. It'll be one of the final media availabilities of West Virginia week. T. Frank, this will be the first opportunity we have to see Penn State on the practice field since they split into the developmental squad and what you could refer to, I guess, as the travel squad. For those unaware, Big Ten games, you can take, I think it's 74 or 75 players on the road. Non-conference games, you can take 80, which, of course, will allow Penn State to take a couple more guys that maybe when they head out on the road to start October and head to USC will not make the trip. Or maybe they will. We'll have to wait and find out. But certainly some guys who go to West Virginia will not be able to go on the road in the Big Ten. But your thoughts on what we could find out tonight, what are you most interested in looking at during that chance to see Penn State in action?
So I've been following the Penn State offense the entire time. I've been following what kind of the progression of how they've worked through camp. And now that they've split, as you mentioned, between the developmental squad and the 2 deep or the varsity squad or the travel squad, however you want to phrase it, I guess the first thing is going to be take an account of exactly who is where. And then another thing I always like to do is figure out who is copying the key players for the other team. So, I forget, 91 is an important number for West Virginia. Who's wearing 91? Who's going to mimic that for the offense? Or number 1, Aubrey Burke's another guy who is very important for that secondary that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Who are the guys that are doing that, and how does that look for the offense? And then just generally, what are they doing? I feel like I can pick up some things from, what they're working on in practice, and obviously we discuss those at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We don't necessarily talk about those here on the show, but generally, what does the practice look like from those perspectives of what can you glean about the upcoming matchup, which is always, I'm told it's always a fool's errand, and I understand, but I still do it anyway. What about you?
Yeah, so I think you hit pretty much all the topics I was thinking of. The only other one is, look, all eyes are going to be on whether or not Caden Saunders is on the practice field. James Franklin, I believe he was the only player mentioned as a guy dealing with bumps and bruises. And, James Franklin on Monday kind of put his availability for Saturday into question. The exact quote was, I'm going to pull it up here now so I don't misinterpret James Franklin's words, but it was Caden is has some bumps and bruises that he has missed some time, and we are working through that right now. Obviously, we're hopeful that he'll be able to go this week and be full go and be able to factor in for us. So that was James Franklin on Caden Saunders on Monday. There will be an update here from James Franklin on Wednesday. I'm sure he will be asked about it Wednesday night. So depending on when you're listening to this, either check out James Franklin's full post-practice interview here at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on the YouTube channel, or go over to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and you can watch the video and read the stories about what he had to say about Caden Saunders and everybody else that comes up this evening during his final chat with the media before West Virginia.
And don't pay any attention to the fact that he's going to say, yeah, we haven't made any of those decisions yet because we just got
He's going to say he's hopeful again. Yeah.
Yeah. So to ignore the fact that he's not really going to answer the question. We're going to ask the question. Somebody's going to ask the question, and we're going to get some sort of answer. So you never know. You know, like lightning does strike twice sometimes. So, or whatever the phrase should be there. I apologize. That was the wrong old person thing to say at the wrong time. I'll get better throughout the rest of the show.
Well, at any rate, we will get better as we move along here on the BWI Live Wednesday show. T. Frank, before we get into some thoughts on the Mountaineers and some of what James Franklin had to say about them on Monday, one question from the chat. Alex asked, what is a training table? So if you missed James Franklin's Monday news conference, and you can both read the transcript of it at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, or after this show, go listen to his news conference here on the YouTube channel. James Franklin discussed the improvements Penn State made with its training table, which, for lack of a better way to put it, is the buffet and energy supplement and nutrition center college football and college athletic teams have. There's one for the Olympic sports at Penn State, or there's one in the process of being built if it's not already built. But the football team has a new one as well. You might remember from a couple of weeks ago, the coaching staff and defensive graduate assistant program alum Jordan Lucas, who has experienced what the training table at Penn State used to be like and now sees what it's like now, started a social media barrage, I guess you could say, of compliments for the work that Penn State did building this training table. But I mean, the long and short of it is, when you hear like things about Andrew Nelson, the sports performance science and things like that, Leanne Loudon, the nutritionist, all those things that go into whether guys need to gain weight and whether guys are, in need of this, in need of that to be at their best performance on both the practice field and on game day. The training table plays a big role in that, in addition to just getting these guys meals during both camp and just in general. So that's what James Franklin was talking about there. There's no question, T. Frank, that Penn State has made a big improvement in that area. Yeah,
and we talked a lot about these factors and some of these conversations yesterday. So, Alex, check out yesterday's live show, because it gets into a lot of different things, not just the what is training table and why it's important, but also he talked about it in terms of things he's been fighting for during his 10 years at Penn State to get more resources for the football program from a facility standpoint. And I don't think people realize, and it's a highly underrated thing, to have the right nutrition. Lifting weights is only half of the equation. Your genetics can wallpaper over a lot of things, and these guys are pre-selected for the fact that they have great genetics for football.
Right.
But at the same time, if you want to maximize your potential, and everyone loves saying turning a 3-star into a 5-star, you have to have the resources available for those players. We talk about growth potential here on the program all the time. Growth is calories plus training. It's not just training plus grit. You can't eat dirt and then get bigger muscles. Like, it's not just all about, the masculinity, the testosterone of it. There is a science to this. And Chuck Losey and the strength and development program are working in part with the nutrition program. I think it's Leanne Loudon, is the nutritionist. These things are critical. They are hand in hand as far as developing athletes. And this is something, by the way, that happens in the NFL too. NFL teams, there is a disparity between the quality of the facilities from program to program in the NFL, and some of those NFL teams invest more and get more out of their players because of that. Now, the saving grace in the NFL is most of those guys are paid millions of dollars so they can afford to do whatever they want from that health perspective. They don't have to be relying on the program to provide it for them. But Penn State student athletes, it's different. Like, you need to have all that stuff available to them so they make the right decision. Making the decision from sleep to nutrition to just all these ways that you take care of your body. It's important for you and me to feel healthy and normal during a season. It's critical for them to feel healthy and normal and to progress and get better at football and make sure that they are at the peak of their performance. And for me, the peak of my performance involves Rogue Shop. RogueShop.com has been a sponsor here on the BWI Live Show for quite a while, and I want to appreciate we're fighting over who's going to be on screen.
Take
right
it
now.
away, T. Frank. Yeah, take it away.
All right. RogueShop.com has been helping me out, getting the best out of me because, I always think of sleep as like a car wash for your brain. Like it's just scrubbing off all the dirt and grime and stress that you had from the day before. And for me, that's always been a problem. Like being able to fall asleep and stay asleep until I found RogueShop.com. And I use their products when I'm having a long day, or especially if I've been doing a live show. There's going to be some nighttime games. There's West Coast games on the schedule. I'm terrified of being up until 2 in the morning with these bright studio lights and giant monitors in my face and just absorbing all of that energy. Well, sometimes you need to wind down and sleep so that you can get up the next day, review the film, and be ready to go. For me, it's RogueShop.com. Whatever you might thought, that's my situation. That's how I relate to the world, is talking to you about my situation. They can help you with yours, whether it's chronic pain or inflammation, issues with stress, anxiety, whatever it might be. RogueShop.com. THC has been tested and is shown to help in a lot of these situations, especially with chronic illnesses. The number one silent killer is inflammation, right? The body's response to pain and a bunch of different things. You can help manage inflammation with some of these products that's been shown in some research to help with all of those things. So check out RogueShop.com if you have any of those situations, and tell them T. Frank from the BWI Live Show sent you, and they'll be happy to know that we are here, and they're a longtime supporter of the show, so appreciate RogueShop.com.
T. Frank, one question from the chat I wanted to get into before we move on to our preview, because I know we're going to go in a bunch of different directions when we get there. So I am going to find it here. Oh, here we go. Going back to the Caden Saunders conversation, who will return punts if Saunders can't? So if you're just checking in for the first time, getting ready for game week, Penn State first-year special teams coordinator Justin Lustig said back at Media Day in early August that Saunders was the leader in the clubhouse to regain the job. He lost midway through the 2023 season to Daquan Hardy. He mentioned some young guys when asked for who else was back there getting work. Some of the names that popped out: Anthony Ivy, Quentin Martin, Josiah Brown, Tyzer Denmark. And there's some other Penn State guys in this program who have fielded punts at not necessarily the college level, but at the high school level. So the answer there, I know it's not the answer you're looking for, but work in progress. I think that obviously, clearly, without question, the hope is that he's ready to go for game day, even if they have to limit his reps just to punt returning. I think that would be an acceptable way for them to go. And if not, it's going to be it's truly wait and see, because again, when you look at where Penn State is at that position, there's not college ready experience there right now.
I want to get your thought on this. And the conversation we got into yesterday, and we've kind of talked about, and James Franklin is openly said at his press conferences, I think it was last time we had post-practice availability, was if you think about the running backs for Penn State, the freshmen, as having a shared red shirt, you can get 8 games out of them in the regular season. At the same time, Quentin Martin is a special athlete. He's shown in high school that he can be a kick and punt returner. So if you're looking to maximize that position and you trust him as a decision maker back there, special teams is a way that he can burn his red shirt very quickly. We know he's big. We know he's fast. We know as a running back he's got some physicality to him. If it's not Saunders and there's this situation lingering a little while, do you think we see him either early on or at some point being a part of the return conversation, like we saw some of Penn State's running backs in the past when you want to get them on the field? Way to get touches for Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and Quentin Martin is to put them on special teams. Do you think that that's a viable option for this team to use athletes to maximize their touches in a game?
I do, but I would certainly like to see how it goes against Bowling Green at home than at West Virginia if given the choice. So I think that's the sort of rock and a hard place Penn State's going to find itself in if Caden Saunders is not ready for Saturday is, you will have to do the risk-reward analysis, for lack of a better way to put it, and figure out who is your best option to just catch the ball and not let it bounce 30 yards the wrong way and not muff it in traffic, especially if it rains like it's supposed to. And that's another factor here. I mean, it's supposed to, they're calling for thunderstorms, precipitation about 80%. How much rain? It seems to be, depending on where you look, you can get whatever opinion you want, either not a lot or a fair amount. So certainly, use your weather apps to your advantage if you're trying to talk people into one thing or the other. But
by the way,
that's another
Greg,
part of it. Yeah.
One of it absolutely is, but one of my least favorite conversations. It's almost like, music snobs, where they're like, "Oh, you like that band?" People and their elitism around what weather app they use. It is it's an underrated elitist thing when you're like, yeah, I checked the weather and it said this. And they're like, oh, what did you use? And I'm like, every time somebody asks, I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm like, I don't know. I use the National Weather Service. And they go, you've got to use the super secret one I know. And I'm like, well, great. Good for you. Then you tell me the weather next time. Don't ask me then.
Right. No, you're right. There is certainly a niche market for different weather apps and what you want to use. But at any rate, again, whether it rains a lot, depending on, the National Weather Service is right or somebody else. Point being, Penn State, if Caden Saunders is not available, really is going to have to do some thinking on what it wants to do here and who its best option is. Caden Saunders talked recently when he was interviewed. We talked to him at Penn State Media Day. This was a little while ago. But, the fact that I don't think you can truly express to somebody, and I can't do it because I haven't done it, but what that feeling is like when there are 11 guys stampeding towards you and you can't look at them because you're watching the ball. And you obviously got to look down and see where they're at so you can make your return decision. But that is a situation that not too many people in life are ever going to find themselves in. And certainly not on the road in a potential, if we're talking a true freshman's first game at Penn State. So that's, again, what and I'm sure, look, this is what Justin Lustig was paid to do. I'm sure they've been working guys out back there all spring and summer for him to just get a feel, now that he's new here, of what Penn State has option-wise back there. Saunders being leader in the clubhouse does not mean somebody else was incapable of doing the job. It meant he was the one that was best fit for it. So we'll see there. But anyway, you ready to roll into West Virginia?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, West Virginia, Penn State set for a noon kick on Fox. Big noon kickoff. I know everyone loves that. The three of those occasions last year for Penn State, fourth, in 2 years, and first in 2024 with Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt, Jenny Taft on the call. Like we said, just go over some nuts and bolts. Penn State's on a 5-game winning streak in this series. T. Frank, they won last year, of course, at Beaver Stadium. Last lost in Morgantown in the 1980s. Probably the last time these two teams will meet for quite some time. West Virginia fans, for that reason, are wound up about this contest, and with good reason. I know you Penn State fans are too, but there certainly, I'm assuming, will be a crowd advantage for the Mountaineers, the home side, in West Virginia on Saturday. And James Franklin talked about that during his Monday news conference at Beaver Stadium.
I think you can make arguments both ways. A team that's returning a ton of starters, and a team that's returning a ton of starters that had success, that creates challenges. I mean, I think if you look at some of the people that rank teams, that's a big factor in ranking teams, right? Like how many returning players that you got. And then the unknowing of the transfer portal and guys coming in, especially if they've come from smaller schools and you don't have as much information on them, that can create some real challenges as well. So I think both is challenging. They've done both, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so this is something that I find super interesting. That was a question I asked James Franklin to begin to discuss at the press conference on Monday. This idea of this West Virginia team. Is it easier to scout a team and be prepared for week one, especially when you're going into a hostile environment with a team that is either A, returning a lot of starters that you played last year and or B, is it better that they have a lot of transfers and they, there's a little bit of an unknown, but then you got, as he mentioned, guys transferring from lower levels and there's some question marks and maybe even they have some question marks. And of course, as he said to start the answer, you guys don't like it when I say this, but it's both. Like it could be both. You can make an argument both ways. And so that's the situation with West Virginia. They return a lot of experience on offense specifically, and key positions, especially the defensive line on defense. But then in the secondary, they have a ton of transfers, which we're going to get to here later in the show. But if you want the full stuff, we're going to get to some of this stuff, and I'll give some of my thoughts. Greg's going to give his thoughts on the offense and the defense here for the preview of the show. But BlueWhiteIllustrated.com right now is the time to sign up. We've actually extended our kickoff sale, 50% off with Kickoff 24. 50% off a yearly membership at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. That is your way in to get all the information, to get Greg's reporting, get our reporting tonight from practice. And of course, as I just mentioned, I wrote an article at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com right now that is previewing the West Virginia defensive line. I wrote about 2,000 words, Greg, and I realized, hey, this needs to be 3 separate articles. So there's going to be a couple of them coming out for the linebackers and the secondary. I think the secondary is super interesting. But check all that out for 50% off Kickoff 24. This deal isn't going to last forever. I don't know when it's going to end. I'm never told these things, Greg. I kind of just dance out here in the darkness of you got to subscribe now. And if you don't, you might miss it. So 50% off is the way to go.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Don't waste any time. Get over to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Sign up with promo code Kickoff24 for 50% off an annual subscription. T. Frank, as we get into this West Virginia team, I think you make a good point on the transfers, and it's an interesting place to start because obviously now more than ever, and if you missed it, by the way, the last spring portal window may be the last one ever. The NCAA this week advancing a proposal to get rid of the spring transfer portal window and just have a window between the end of the day after Selection Sunday and the end of the season, end of the postseason. So keep an eye out for that. We'll have to wait and see if that gets passed. They meet and discuss that in October. But as it relates to this game, the portal is going to have an impact on this game. And I'm going to let you talk about the West Virginia side of it and specifically its defense. But let's not forget the Penn State side of it. What will Julian Fleming have in store in his Penn State debut? Will Nolan Rucci play? I think the answer to that question is an obvious yes. But what does that right tackle split look like between him and Anthony Donko?
Yep.
And then, when you look just at the defensive side of the ball with A.J. Harris and Jalen Kimber at cornerback, what impact do those two guys have in a room that is absolutely, I think, on par with the one Penn State had a season ago, but is breaking in some new faces that have not started for a Tom Allen defense or in some cases a Penn State defense. So the portal is certainly going to impact many games this year. There's no question about that, T. Frank. This one, though, without question, it will play a major role in.
Yeah, and to understand kind of the differences between last year and this year, skip ahead and just kind of bring this part up because we're talking about the portal. Last year, coming into this game, West Virginia had an entirely new secondary, pretty much. They had some returning corners, but their secondary from their safeties, maybe some of their nickel position, they were all transfers. And they came in the spring transfer portal window. If you've ever tried to learn football, learn a defense, even if you are a college football player who is a veteran, it's a lot to know right off the bat and execute without mistakes in week one. If you're arriving in May or even June for some of these guys and they were playing, that's a problem. So this year, things are a little bit different. Yes, they brought in a tidal wave of transfers in the secondary, but here is when they arrived. TJ Crandall, Aiden Garnes, Grant Hollis, Jameen Joseph. Garnes and Hollis, from what I've read, those guys are expected to be corners that start or play significantly for them. They got here either last year in December or February of this year. That is plenty of time. Now we're in a position where those guys can play a little bit faster and a little bit cleaner out of the gate. But there's still a couple guys who they've been monitoring this offseason and they've been trying to get up to speed who arrived in May. And that's tough. So, yes, there's a giant wave of transfers, but as you mentioned, A.J. Harris, Jalen Kimber, both transfers for Penn State as well. And I think on this side, Penn State, either fans or us reporting on things, feel confident about those guys executing and playing well. And I think West Virginia feels the same way, given when they got in here. So it is a big difference between last year and this year for that transfer portal barrage of players. And it really is on defense. They've got guys at linebacker. They've got guys at defensive end that have joined the team. Up front, it's more depth, but in the secondary, they're going to have to rely on some of these guys to play. And honestly, after last year, they needed some new blood in the secondary where there were some struggles. And some of the things we're getting into later in the week were pretty alarming if you are a defensive coordinator calling coverages that are supposed to eliminate big plays, and you're still giving up big plays. So they need a refresher on defense, and they may have gotten it in this situation.
Is this the part where we talk about the Penn State receivers 25 minutes into the show? Did we wait long enough?
Yes,
obviously.
Yes, we did.
That's a matchup to watch, though. We'll have a look at the matchups over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com throughout the week, of course. But that is, I think, without a doubt, one of the matchups of this game. Can Penn State, against this fairly new look West Virginia secondary, hit some big plays? I think we forget Harrison Wallace had 7 catches for 72 yards last year in this game. Keandre Lambert-Smith had a nice game, obviously not at Penn State anymore. But the point being is that secondary was there to be had last year, and it could be again this year. We'll have to wait and see how those transfers work out for the Mountaineers. But, Penn State obviously has Andy Kotelnicki now calling the shots, and there is no question that West Virginia fans, as they look at this game and try and take whatever comes out of it for the 2024 season, they were going to look at this game in the secondary and what that unit does is going to be a big part of their outlook moving forward. And for Penn State fans, I am almost certain that the same thing can be said about the receivers. And if you find yourself about 4 o'clock on Saturday happy with how the receivers played, you probably are going to feel a lot better about the future of this Penn State team in 2024 than you are if you're on here screaming at T. Frank on the postgame show about the play of the receivers. So,
It'll be weakness
that is
on weakness, right?
Right.
That's how it shapes up. We talk about strength on strength. A lot of times weakness on weakness has a similar outcome in a lot of games.
Yes, so very much something to keep an eye on here. I guess we'll stick with the West Virginia defense, T. Frank. Penn State, again, brings Andy Kotelnicki in, Drew Aller, second-year starter. The Penn State, of course, had success against this unit a year ago. It's a little bit different looking at all parts of it, though. There's some guys that are stepping in the roles that maybe they did not have a year ago. Let's move on to Aubrey Burks, a player that I know you're very, very interested in, and the impact that he could have on this game.
Yeah, he's a guy that I kind of have highlighted based on what they've done with him. They talked about moving him closer to the action. He's going to be essentially, he and Jalen Reed made the same transition from free safety to what they call the bandit, what Penn State calls the lion, what everyone should just call the nickel. Let's just call it the nickel, guys. Anyway, Jalen Reed has some size and skill based on his performance that I think you should feel pretty good about that transition and the way that he plays and some of the things that he does and the way Penn State's defense is constructed overall that make it I think a positive transition where he can make some plays. Watching Burks last year and looking at his skill set, I don't know exactly how that fits. And I got into some of the details, got into some of the data with Burks and looking at his film. He struggled to fill in the run game. And he's a little bit smaller. He is more of a free safety than Jalen Reed is, who brings a little more size and physicality to the position. And even then, I would say both guys, I'm still curious about how Jalen Reed is going to do in man coverage. It has not been a strength of his throughout his career. He's gotten better and worse at it over time. There's been flashes of good. I think Burks has a little bit more where he could give there as more of that pure coverage player, but the data didn't say that last year as far as what he gave up in slot coverage. Again, that's all coming up later this week to get the details there, but that's something I'm keying on because the way this defense works is it's a fast-flowing defense where they try to keep 2 players deep at all times, and this is a Big 12 thing where you keep 2 players deep in the safety position, but they are triggering downhill the minute they see run, which means you keep 2 to 4 players deep, and then you give up explosive plays anyway, which is just the total Big 12 of this whole thing where, you play soft coverage and you give up big plays anyway because you're trying to have it both ways. Right. So you've got to have safeties and slot corners that flow to the football really well. From Andy Kotelnicki's perspective, he put up it wasn't all offensive scoring, but it's 55-42 against West Virginia 2 years ago. So they put up some big points, especially on the ground, because guys were in the wrong position. This reactionary defense that is trying to rally to the football with smaller players, Andy Kotelnicki is really good at, like, close-up magic where it's like, here's the quarter. Wait, no, it's behind your ear. Wait, touchdown. So those sort of things in this defense and the way that they've transitioned their players around, putting Burks in this position, that's a matchup and a situation I'm very interested to see how it plays out early. If he comes out and he's the veteran who's better and has gotten, players can get better, he's practiced this position all season, all off season, that could be an advantage for West Virginia, or it could not. Like, that choice could backfire, and he could not be good in that situation. So that's something I think is going to be a major factor on how the offense for Penn State is able to attack and have success against the defense.
Yes, no question about that. One other guy on defense I know you want to highlight, Sean Martin, defensive lineman for the Mountaineers.
Yeah.
What kind of impact would you expect for him to have on this game in a contest where Penn State will be starting 3 new offensive linemen across the board? Now, this, again, I keep prefacing this conversation by noting that Drew Shelton has played a lot of football at Penn State. They set for left tackle, first year starting left tackle, but third year Nittany Lions. Has played a lot of football. Anthony Donko got Peach Bowl experience. Nolan Rucci has been around for a long time. Nick Dawkins, of course, becomes a first-time starter at center. But what kind of impact do you think he can have on this game, depending on what the Mountaineers decide to do with lining him up across the formation on Saturday?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into that question in terms of how they use him and how they attack. They are not an aggressive team. First off, they play generally 3-down linemen, so he is a 5-technique defensive end lined up over the tackle. So basically, he's a defensive tackle that plays on the edge. And so he's not going to get a lot of pressure, but in that still, you think of guys like Cam Hayward or J.J. Watt in the NFL, examples everybody knows, not trying to compare him to those players, but like that's the position he plays, is the same position those guys play. They can still be active, aggressive pass rushers getting one-on-ones when you blitz or simulate pressure, whatever you want to do. And last year, he didn't get home. And so there was a little bit of, he's a guy that has the most NFL potential on this defense from a body type ability perspective, but it didn't really translate. And neither did it translate in the run, by the way, which is what he should be really good at. I do think injury was a part of it. I'm, doing context clues here. I'm not necessarily going to be like a doctor and diagnosing with anything. But do you remember the Gronk robot arm where Rob Gronkowski had a brace from about his forearm up to his shoulder that was just like a mechanical arm to keep his elbow from falling apart? Martin had one of those last year, or some version of that throughout the season. So I do think that there was some injury involved where he wasn't as strong or as violent as he could have been. So that's a big factor. What is his health? What is his overall potential now that he is I think he's a senior at this point? He is not a guy that's going to win with speed, but he needs to play with more power than he did last year. If he can do that, then I think Penn State might be in trouble from that pass rush or run defense perspective. But to me, it's all about run defense and run blocking up front, because everything from Andy Kotelnicki's offense flows from the credible threat of the run. You don't have to run 13 times to set up the pass, but you do need to run credibly and have a credible threat to make all those guys chase the wrong way. And if you have 3 guys up front for West Virginia that are controlling the line of scrimmage, Penn State's in a bad spot. And Martin is the guy that's going to lead that for West Virginia. And that's another one of those kind of unknowns coming into this game. What is his development and what is his health and all of those things?
Right. So a guy to keep a close eye on Saturday. Before we wrap this up, just generally speaking, Penn State offense versus West Virginia defense, and we're going to go to the other side of the coin. Who do you give the edge to on Saturday? My opinion, I can't go into this game buying that West Virginia is so much better on defense that a lot of the things that plagued it a year ago are suddenly going to be magically fixed. And I can't help but to think that Andy Kotelnicki will be able to take advantage of it, even in a road environment with Drew Aller at the helm. So I give the edge to the Penn State offense. I'm not saying it's leaps and bounds, but I have a hard time not giving Penn State the edge, even on the road, in this matchup when it comes to the Penn State offense versus the West Virginia defense.
I like Andy Kotelnicki's scheme. I don't like the West Virginia scheme. So one of the things I'm going to write about later this week is their use of 8-man coverages. This is, again, a very Big 12 thing to do, is rush 3 defenders and play coverage with 8. And also a Big 12 thing to do is to still give up explosive plays in those situations. And they did that last year. And so are they going to do that again? Is that going to be their plan for this season? Or in week 1, are we going to see some very different things? Are they going to go the other way and be hyper aggressive and have cover 0 blitzes? I could see that. I could see them throwing in a wrinkle like that, especially with the home crowd advantage, where you have that at the snap opportunity to get some free rushers because communication could be poor. I think that's the only thing that's preventing me from saying I think it's a decisive advantage for Andy Kotelnicki. That and the continuity of coordinators staying in position where they are for West Virginia. I think those two things make it more even, but I like the scheme and I like the overall talent. Penn State's offensive line is more talented than the West Virginia defensive line. Vesterinen, the other defensive lineman, he's quick, he's athletic. He didn't show like a lot of strength at the point of attack where he would challenge a guy like Vega Ioane. And then you look at Fatorma Mulba, he found a home. He's a good nose tackle. He's more athletic than when he left here, but more athletic doesn't mean he's athletic. And this scheme is going to challenge those guys to run and be athletic. I think that Penn State's offensive line is more athletic and is stronger. They just have to play like it. And that's going to be the biggest thing for them to do in week 1. I think that determines 60% of the game, probably, in my opinion.
No doubt about it. I want to get to this point quick before we go to the other side of the ball. If you're listening to the show here, thank you for doing so. Kotelnicki's first game, this is a comment from Browns and Beers on YouTube. Kotelnicki's first game at PSU, though, could take some time to get the adjustments going, essentially, is what the point is. We've heard that a lot this offseason, and I guess my counter to that, it's a fair point, and I understand it, but I also look at cross college football, and a lot of teams, the coaching carousel spins every year. And a lot of teams don't miss a beat when it comes to the first game of the season with a new coordinator. And there's plenty of experience back. Again, we've talked about the receiver issues and the new starters up front. But to me, if Andy Kotelnicki is as good of a coach as he seems to be, and as good of a communicator as he seems to be, and as good of a scheme design guy as he seems to be, there will be no excuse for, it's his first game. They need time to get it going, in my opinion. Again, it's new and it's all that's great, but there's still only 12 regular season games. And you had a whole offseason to get this ready. You didn't just show up to start preseason camp. Right.
This is something. So 2 things, and obviously, who was that? I think it was Sid. Was it Sid Snyder? Browns. You mentioned Browns and Beer. Sid Snyder also here as a West Virginia fan. And I just got to ask, are you related, long lost cousin of Ryan Snyder? Because, surprised he hasn't mentioned anything about West Virginia relatives. Anyway, to Browns and Beer's point, it is a valid one, but as James Franklin has talked about, so the West Virginia fans who are joining us for the first time, and by the way, I'm doing my best. I watch your team. I do the best analysis I can for Penn State fans. If you know more than me about your team, I'm not surprised. So, if you leave that comment, I'm not surprised. They have done intentional things to integrate this offense quickly, where they have changed some of the minor tweaks to the concepts that were already very similar to what they did last year. They're keeping the verbiage the same so that Penn State players don't have to learn new verbiage for the same stuff. And with new rules that everyone has, by the way, they can get through the summer with instruction as well. James Franklin called it summer OTAs, basically, like in the NFL where you have those organized team activities in June. So they've had more time to get this all ready. Is there an opportunity for guys to do a bunch of whoopsies and brain farts? Yes, sure. There is, but less than in the past. I think they've been doing their best to de-emphasize that coming into the game. And so is that communication rock solid in the environment we're going to see? Going back to that, that's the biggest question for me.
There's no doubt about it. T. Frank, let's move to the other side of the ball. Take a look at the West Virginia offense against the Penn State defense. The Nittany Lions come into this contest, of course, with Tom Allen as their first year defensive coordinator. West Virginia returns Garrett Green and a number of very successful players on offense. Obviously, I think if you just look at the preseason magazines or the stories out of West Virginia this offseason, clearly the concern was replacing the very talented offensive linemen that are no longer there. They do return some pretty solid players. I'm a big Wyatt Millum fan, the left tackle, who you're going to notice on Saturday. But as we get into this discussion about the Penn State defense and the West Virginia offense, I mean, do you want to start anywhere else but Garrett Green, or do you want to start in the backfield? Your call.
No. Like I wrote this in the preview in our Sunday film study. So I did some stuff at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for fans with some video. I think I did video. I apologize. I tore down my studio for James Franklin's press conference, so I don't think I did any video this weekend. But anyway, the point being, Garrett Green, the way I wrote it is there's two things that determine your preseason ranking. Are you returning a quarterback, and was he good? And yes for West Virginia. So that's a huge equalizer in this game. I said maybe 40% or 60% is going to be determined by how Penn State runs the football. The rest of it is Garrett Green. The rest of it is how well he plays and how well he attacks the Penn State defense, because this is a guy, watching him on film, he is the opposite of Drew Aller. He is hyper aggressive with the football, but in a way that you want, where it's calculated aggression, where it's smart throws that he's got either matchup advantages or a guy wins, and he makes the decision to be risky with the football. But from what I saw, generally they're good decisions. There were some accuracy issues last year, which apparently he's fixed. So overall, I think you wrote this earlier this week. PFF said that the better quarterback is in Morgantown in this game. I think from a performance situation last year, I would give that edge to Green as well, in terms of being able to make big plays. I've talked about this on the show. Big time throw percentage, what I just said about making those calculated aggressive risks. He led college football among starting quarterbacks with big time throws from PFF. That is a field flipping throw, an important decision that the quarterback individually made to beat the defensive coverage. He was the number one quarterback at that last year. They also played a terrible schedule. Big 12 defenses are bad. There's no way around that. So that's going to be the catch here. Is Penn State's defense so good that they're going to put him in a situation where he doesn't have those?
Correct. And that will be one of the things that determines this game, as Penn State, of course, brings Tom Allen. And we're going to find out for the first time what a Tom Allen defense looks like at this level, right? I mean, he has been at Indiana, of course, the Big Ten, but I think he even said it recently. I don't know if he's ever had 6 defensive tackles to rotate through.
Yeah.
Don't know if he's ever had 3 safeties to play his defense the way he probably envisions it being played. And that's not trying to take a shot at Indiana players. It's just a very simple reality that Penn State is more talented across the board than Indiana is defensively. So, and that's obviously been the case. The other thing I keep going back to about Tom Allen is he has not called his own defense just as defensive coordinator, not with head coach responsibility, since 2016.
Right.
And so, I'm sure I see somebody mentioning that in the chat that West Virginia went back and watched Kansas film for Andy Kotelnicki, which I'm sure was helpful. But I have questions about how helpful Indiana's film is for West Virginia. Do I think that they can get some stuff out of it? Yeah, of course. There's no doubt. But the fact that Tom Allen was head coach and defensive coordinator, and then he handed off the play calling at one point, and it was back and forth in a blend. And I just wonder what that looks like when he's blending his stuff with Penn State's existing stuff in a role where he does not have to do anything but watch film and plan defense and game plan. And of course,
which he loves to do.
He does love to do. Yes,
he loves to do it. And so I think that's another, again, the difference between these two teams. In terms of the things I like about their scheme, because Tom Allen does things from a coverage perspective that lean towards the crazy, like the Big 12 crazy sort of defenses, except that I call them spaghetti defenses because they drop 8 and they try to obscure coverage based on numbers and volume of players in odd positions. Tom Allen plays classically structured defenses that have uncommon rotations and put guys in unexpected positions, but still maintain a semblance of traditional structure. So instead of just having to diagnose who's the player that's not supposed to be there, and suddenly I know the coverage and I can throw against a cover 3 defense with 8 defenders on the backside and find a seam for 30 yards. Now you're looking at the coverage and you're thinking, okay, this is a 2-eye defense, and suddenly it's a cover 1 where you've got guys that are dropping into coverage from odd positions, or however he wants to structure it, where now you're looking at a completely different defense after the snap. And those, to me, that's, again, I'm a fan of Tom Allen and what he's done over time at Indiana. Now he doesn't have the shackles of, I have to play guys in certain positions. So up front, they were very static in terms of, this is our 1 technique, this is our run stuffer, this is our 3 technique, because they had to recruit guys that were big and slow or small and fast. Now they have guys that are medium-sized and both, and some guys that are big and fast and strong. So he can do more. And like you said, we haven't seen what that looks like at Penn State yet. He could evolve on what Manny Diaz did. He could evolve on what he did and create an entirely new thing that we see for the first time in week 1.
There's no doubt about it. The one thing that, of course, Penn State will have to watch for, and Tom Allen will have to watch for with Garrett Green, is, of course, his ability to run the ball. He was very active with his feet throughout the 2023 season against Penn State last year, 15 rushes for 71 yards and a touchdown. And so, I think over the course of the year, 13 rushing touchdowns on 120 attempts. So they will use him that way as well. Running quarterbacks have at time been a little bit of an issue for Penn State over the course of the James Franklin era, maybe not as recently, but I think that's certainly one way that he will be able to impact this game. And we'll see, again, I think the backfield in West Virginia is very good. I think this is a good team. I do. And I felt the same way last year, despite, I know Neil Brown went from there almost being no chance of him getting a sixth year at West Virginia to it being a guarantee with the way that season finished. But at the same time, I felt like this West Virginia team was better when it left Beaver Stadium than what it showed. And the question to me is can they, if they're going to win this game, they're going to have to make some of the plays that, the sequence I go back to from that game last year is the third quarter. West Virginia was down 7. They had the ball to Penn State 27, 2 Garrett Green incompletions. Later, Penn State went on a long drive for a field goal, and it put the game pretty much out of reach. It was, it was only still a 10-point game at that time, but by and large, Penn State skipped away from there. Can West Virginia make those plays this year? That's the question to me.
I got distracted. I'm sorry. Sid, nobody laughed the first time. This is the second time he's tried a pickle joke. Greg, how many times have you heard the pickle joke in your life?
Quite a few. Quite a few. Well, let me thank, we got our first super chat of the day, T. Frank. So let's thank Mech Engineer 100, it looks like. Appreciate you.
Yeah. He's
Appreciate
a regular here.
as well.
Love to have him. He's got a lot of good thoughts in the chat. And by the way, Sid, we're having a good time. I hope you don't feel like anyone's mad or anything. Like, we're just having a good time here on the show. Sometimes we pick on people in the chat because sometimes people in the chat pick on us. And so it's fair is fair. What was your question? What were we talking about before I got distracted by Sid?
Yeah, just your general thoughts. I'm going to move the conversation away from Garrett Green and the running back room, which I think is very good and underrated at West Virginia. And we can't go any further, I don't think, without talking about the offensive line, the changes that have been made there, what they return. To me, when I look at this, I assume Penn State is going to try and overload the right side of West Virginia's line and see what happens. And so I'm not sure if you still saw the same thing, but just looking at the way things set up there, that would seem to be a logical place to start.
So from what I understand, and give credit to West Virginia for having a really good group of beat reporters that are on a lot of this stuff. So last year's right guard, Brandon Yates, is going to move to center. And then they did a good job, kind of like Penn State has tried to do, of getting guys experience so that they don't have first-time starters with no experience. So both Jaquay Hubbard and the right tackle's name is escaping me at the moment. I apologize. Nick Malone. Both those guys played a lot last year. They are likely going to step into that right side. I think the issue is when you lose a second-round draft pick at center in Zach Frazier and Doug Nestor, who was a good football player and a veteran offensive lineman, this group is a little less athletic than they were last year. So that is something that when Penn State is more athletic at the defensive line position, or at least bigger than they were last year and stronger and stouter against the run, and that's your strength as a group, I think Hubbard is a big dude. He doesn't necessarily play with that size. Like, impact is not really impressive when he's able to pull or get to the second level. And then if you don't have that athleticism on top of it, that's going to be a problem for West Virginia. But at the same time, their scheme is a little bit like Andy Kotelnicki in terms of it's very difficult, and it puts guys in conflict where they do a lot of things to pull guys out of their run fits. And so Penn State's defense has to be on point. Tony Rojas is great. This is going to be the biggest challenge out of the gate for him to understand and process information and be in the right gap. And that's going to be a really big thing. Athletically, he can track down Garrett Green. He can track down those guys from an athletic perspective. But if you're playing from behind or if you're a step out of place, that's how you get Abdul Carter having the game he did last year to start the season. So I think that from the offensive line and the run game perspective, Penn State is, this is a Penn State show. I cover Penn State football. Greg, do you think Penn State has the advantage with their front seven? Or am I just being a homer there?
No, so a couple things there. I think that I do believe, the camp that West Virginia, I think the going rate, and I said this earlier and I'll say it again, but I think the going rate is that West Virginia's offensive line is going to take a massive step back. And I don't think it's going to be as severe as predicted by many people. And if I'm wrong on Saturday, I'll be happy to say so next Wednesday. But I don't think this offensive line is going to be as drastically worse as a lot of people seem to think based on what they lost. But when you look at the Penn State front seven, what's going to be, I think the answer to that question is going to come, and I would probably, just based on the fact that, you're starting a number of new guys on the offensive line and one in a different position, very almost, somewhat similar to Penn State. And what we know about Penn State's edge rushers and what we think, Tony Rojas and Kobe King can be in the middle. I'd give Penn State an edge. It would not be a significant edge at the moment. I need to see it first. I need to see what this 4-2-5 look with Tom Allen is. I need to see that the defensive tackles who returns for Penn State for another season are ready to go and play at a high level. So I'm not willing to make it seem like it's drastic because I don't know that it is. I think it could be. Certainly think it could be. Not ready to go that far yet, though. So, I do think there's an edge. And I wrote this in something that'll be on Blue White Illustrated on at some point this week. But really, as we come down the home stretch here, the thing to me, T. Frank, and I see there's a question in the chat we'll get to here in one sec, Ryan. But the thing to me is to predict an upset here, I feel like you better be able to find a fair amount of edges to point to West Virginia besides maybe the rain. It's a home game. 3 new coordinators for Penn State. So, to me, and I can't find enough of them to predict that. But Ryan, I'm going to let you answer Ryan's question here. Ryan, Stephen Light donated to the channel. Thank you. Ryan, I hope it's sheared. If not, let me know.
Yeah.
Will PSU put a spy on Green? Who would that be if so? Any thoughts on that, T. Frank? That's always, I wait for, and if you're not a Blue White Illustrated member, join now or join before kickoff. Don't wait for that kickoff sale to go away. But the in-game thread, the lovely in-game thread where everyone,
join us.
Opines on every play, which is awesome and fun. But what you will see, let me get this comment out of the way so you can see the code there. There we go. Yep, 50% off at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Off an annual subscription. It's kickoff24, the code, to get that. But what you'll see during the game, if there's any kind of success for Garrett Green, is that pages and pages and pages will start filling up with spy. Where's the spy? Why is there no spy?
Yep.
And so Ryan kind of made me look ahead there and realize that if it happens, it's coming, and it's going to come quick. If you're in that in-game thread, if you're watching today and it happens and you're in that in-game thread on Saturday, you are going to remember this moment and be like, yeah, that's what he was talking about.
So I'm going to give you two different answers because I think that this is a key matchup in the game for Penn State from a run perspective as well. And I'm going to use Spy as kind of a QB corral guy in the run game. So the option game is going to be a devastating part of the game plan for Penn State if deny Dennis Sutton, bigger, more physical guy, not as agile as some of the guys they had there previously. Last year saw guys put him in read option situations, and he struggled to change direction and track down mobile quarterbacks in the open field. So that is something I'm watching for, how Penn State plays the option situation with their defensive line. What they can do is decide to crash him at the running back and then scrape over top with Tony Rojas, or they can bring Jalen Reed down from the secondary from that Lion position. So there's two options there in the run game. And then from the passing game, I think it's Tony Rojas. What I've seen from Tom Allen when they blitz or when they use their Mike and Will linebackers in some of the blitz packages, and we saw this last year with Abdul Carter, your most athletic, most explosive sideline to sideline guy, you can choose to rush him at the quarterback or flush him out of the pocket. The bird dog's going into the brush to get the bird out, and then you go and you get the kill. And I think Tony Rojas is the guy who's going to track it down in the open field. The problem is going to be, do you give the right rush lane and the right escape hatch? Because you can flush the quarterback where you want him to go based on where the pressure comes and how all this works. They had a plan last year for corralling him in the pocket or having him flush into pressure, and then Hakeem Beamon fell over. Abdul Carter fell on his face. Like, guys kept slipping instead of being on their feet and getting the sack, tackle for loss, or stringing the play out wide. I think it's a similar plan, but I think it's Tony Rojas this year from the coverage perspective. So Tony is going to be big in that situation of keeping Garrett Green under wraps. That's my prediction. And then you can throw in Jalen Reed there as kind of an overload so that there's no good option in the option game, which again is a huge part of what they've done historically under Neil Brown.
Kind of disappointed in the chat. I was expecting, as soon as you said slip and slide, that there'd be a lot more rain comments popping in, but not the case.
It's been all they exhausted all those bullets earlier in the show. That's been a common thing. Also want to shout out Stephen Light. Greg, the longer you hear the live show, you're going to recognize the regulars. Stephen Light,
Indeed.
Ryan, these are our regulars who are always here. Stephen says, great show as always. Thanks. And he typos will kill me one day. Dude, me too, and I write for a living, so I feel you there. Thanks to everybody who's Greg, we're in regular season mode. We're in post-game show mode already here on the live show. Love everyone joining us. If you're here on the show, please like the video. 55 minutes in, you've been listening, a lot of you guys, since the beginning of the show. If you haven't liked the video, it helps us out quite a bit. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe. We always like to have new faces, and we talk, I think, the best Penn State football coverage here on the internet. We are the largest talk show for Penn State football anywhere on the planet. I've done my research. There's two things I know to be true. I am the only Thomas Frank Carr on the planet, and this is the largest Penn State talk show on the internet or terrestrial radio. So this is where you want to go for Penn State football.
No question about it, T. Frank. Any final thoughts? I will wrap up with this. We're going to have our game predictions over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on Thursday, so be sure to check those out. I'm not going to spoil mine because it's not fun, but the one thing I will say is that, again, I feel pretty strongly that if I could find a couple edges for West Virginia in this game, and I'm not talking about the rain, I'm just talking about strictly the X and O matchup. If I could find a couple edges, I could envision an upset. I just don't find enough in this game. In fact, the one that could come maybe is a kicker. They do return their kicker. Penn State is obviously, Sanders Sahadek's been here a while, has been in the hunt for the job, didn't keep the job, so on and so forth. Ryan Barker, the redshirt freshman, battling him as well. But I find an edge there, and I can't talk myself into enough otherwise to think that Penn State's talent won't eventually take over in this game. Maybe they won't cover. I don't know. But I have a hard time not seeing a win. Final thoughts, T. Frank, as we come down the home stretch. BWI Live on Wednesday.
Yeah, a couple of things I just want to throw in here that we're going to talk about a little bit later on this week. Check out the articles coming up previewing the Penn State offense versus the defense for West Virginia. But on the flip side, Hudson Clement, oh boy, is that guy fast for West Virginia. I think he and Garrett Green, that could be a combination that could cause Penn State some problems. That might be one of those situations if they score enough points and put Penn State in chase mode, that could be a problem for the Nittany Lions. And Clement last year, 177 yards, 3 touchdowns against Duquesne, which was most of his production last year. But he's got the talent to take a step this year. We'll have to see how that was. Traylon Ray, big, fast, physical guy. They learned how to use him last year, I think, at the end of the season. His average depth of target was 20 yards over the final 4 games. So those big receivers, both those guys are big. They're fast. I like Penn State's secondary, but there's a lot of untested stuff out there, and Garrett Green's a good quarterback. So when you give him enough options and weapons, I don't know that this will turn into a shootout, but I think you could have some explosive plays mixed into all the run game, and that is a way for West Virginia to stay in the game, is getting those big plays through the air to complement and frustrate Penn State's defense so they can't lock in on the run game.
That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickel. It's BWI Live, Wednesday, August 28th. Ryan and Sean back tomorrow with T. Frank on the recruiting show. Be sure to visit BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for the latest on the Nittany Lions. Kickoff's almost here. Thank you for everyone that joined us today. We will see you next time, and we'll see you over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Have a good day, everyone.